Moved over to the computer now, and I've logged into bikefitting.com onto our bike fitting system. I've gone through a couple of screens already, which was just personal information, and then this takes us to the next section of the input screens. I skipped the input because I've already done that for this customer. This is actually me, so this will show my bikes, and then we'll have a look at the various different bits and pieces I got in there. So I think what we'll do is we'll have a look at the road bike. That'll be a bit of fun. So we'll look at the forwards one, and this will show us the bike fit for the forwards one for me. Okay, so the first screen we get, this is just a normal intake screen. So we're going to select what type of bike we want to go for. So this customers are going to go with a road bike, and then they want competition. I don't need to put any previous bike information in here. We just need to know what we need to build for this particular customer. Okay, so this next screen is when we input the information for the shoe that the customer's using, the pedals that they're going to use, and any additional bike data we need to put in. So this is the shoes I use on my bike. It will upset quite a lot of roadies, but I use a Shimano XC901, which is the cross-country shoe, and it then gives us the sole thickness. We'll come back to this later, that's quite important. And then the pedal data, so I'm on my road bike, again it will upset purist road riders, but I use Shimano XTR pedals on mine, so a double-sided SPD pedal. That's because of a particular injury I've had over years, and I find that the float helps me with that. So I'm using XTR pedals on mine, and then it also gives us the pedal height as well. That's very important. So these two numbers here will dictate the saddle height, so that will help with our XY later as well. We'll come back to that in a bit. This down the bottom, the bike data, so the seat tube angle is taken from the geometry page on the forwards website, so I will put that in there. It needs that to calculate the information it outputs. And then I can input a crank length into here. So I particularly like using 170mm cranks, and it will be interesting later to see what the system says I need. But it will, this is like an override size. So when we get the output information, this will tell us which one I should have, and then which one it recommends, should I say. And then I also can say which one I want to use on there. So we'll just go to the next screen and then see what we've got next. So this is how we select the saddle. I've got the tool here, which measures your sit bones. So we will get you to sit on that. We do it a number of times, and then we'll get an average. That then gives us the size that we need to match you to the saddle. I'll show you that on the separate video. So we're using the Pro Stealth saddle, and then it's got two different widths. You can either have a 142 or a 152, and then my saddle seat measuring output told me that I needed a 142, which is why I use that, and it is correct. It feels fantastic. So we're going next. And then this is your shoulder width. So I'll show you again on the other camera what the shoulder width tool looks like. So we basically measure your shoulder width with that tool, and then we put in the information that we require. So my forwards one and the top spec forwards one comes with a Pro Vibe Aero Superlight handlebar. So that's the carbon aero bar, and then it's telling me that I need a 42 width bar, which you would probably expect with a 410mm shoulder width. So then we'd click next, because this has told us what bar we need. And then this is all my vital statistics. So we'll just use the machine, which again I'll show you on the other camera, and then we take your height, measure your torso, measure your inseam, measure how long your left arm is, right arm is, how long or how big your feet are, and then the shoulder width we've already done, which I showed you on the previous screen. We then enter that information into this column, and then that will show us on this column the measurements that it's calculating for us. So it does some calculations to work out how long your arms are based on the measurements that we input here. That tells us your arm length. And then if you notice just here, this has got a check next to it. So when I'm actually inputting the information when the customer's here, this would actually show red on the main entry screen. And what that's just saying is it's saying just double check this measurement because it is outside of the average for the input information we've done before. So what that's actually saying is that my feet are small. So I don't know if that's rude or not, but it's highlighted that, but it is correct. So that's what we've got in there. So when we've got all the information in, we would just click next. And then this gives us the bike setup screen. So this starts out outputting the XY axis information just here. We'll show you this on the report in a second. But this first screen is would be more based if it's a custom bike and you were doing custom tubes, etc. So that isn't really what we want to look at. So we want to go next, and we want to look at our own frames. So Forwards actually has all of their frames and model data uploaded to the servers. So when we get to this screen, we can go to brand, choose Forwards, select the bike. Because we went, if you remember at the beginning of this, we went and we chose the road bike. Because we chose the road bike, it's only showing the road bikes for this bike fit. So it shows the 2023 update 1. So we click on that, click calculate, and then this outputs what bike we need. So it shows here the various different frame sizes. So this is actually showing that frame would be a large, and then based on the large output that it says, it then tells us here what stem length that we would be fit into that particular bike. And then we can then work out with these numbers and measurements here how much spaces we need to fit underneath. So on the printout, it just gives us an XY axis coordinates, which we use on the laser machine downstairs, and then we put a tool here on the handlebar which will measure the center of the bar and then the center of the bar that way, so we can work out length and then we can work out height. And then there's also a point that we measure here, and that is at the 80mm wide part of the saddle. So we have a little gauge that goes across there with a dot on the side, and then we line a laser up to that to calculate the fore and after the saddle and then up and down. And that's a far more accurate way of doing it than doing a tape measure or a tool just to the top of the saddle. Although we do have that tool, and we will use that to cross-reference this number here. So we can do XY to that point, and then we'll cross-reference it with the saddle height, and then we can do XY to this point, and then that will help us work out what spaces we require to put in there. Interestingly, this is output in a 172.5 crank length, although I'm using a 170, which I personally prefer. It just takes a bit of load off my aging knee. So that's what it does. On my bike, just for transparency, what I've actually gone for is I've gone for a medium in the 1. So just to show you what happens, if I've got the 52 large recommended size selected, it will tell you what stem length you need just here. If I change that, it then will give us an alternative recommended stem length there. So it would say we could change that. And then if you notice the numbers here as well, it will change the spaces that you require. So that number there is changing. So the larger frame's obviously got a bigger head tube, so that doesn't need as many spaces. And then when we go to a medium frame, it needs more spaces, and then that's obviously getting smaller with the medium. But that's the personal preference. We'll have a discussion with the customer to work out, how they want to use it. I wanted that bike as a really nimble race bike, so that's what I've gone for that. So I didn't want it to be sort of laid out relaxed bike. I can use my GR20 for that, so that's why I've gone for this. I went for a medium size, and I've actually got a 110 stem on mine. I haven't got 120, so 110. I'm not as flexible as I probably should be, so I am just slightly shorter on my stem, which just gives me a fantastic fit on that bike. So when we've done that, we'll select it as the 49, so it will show there. So I have chosen my preferred size, and then we click complete report. Okay, then it drops us into the report builder. So you'll get some numbers come up here in just a second, or some check marks according to the selection of the road bike, which is what we've just done. So road bike competition, and then this just shows us the information that we're going to get from the report. So you don't need to know about the intake information. So if we just select all that, and then click show PDF, what this will do is this will download me the PDF document, and then we can open that. It'll be interesting how it does it on the screen share. Actually, I've not tried this yet, so we'll see. Okay, and then that's the document just down here in the corner. So this is the PDF document that gets outputted after we have finished the bike fit process. So as we scan down through here, it just shows all the information we added. So it shows you the shoe data, the pedal data, and then some of the basic bike data, the cranks I chose, shows you the angle of the seat tube there. It shows you what saddle we've chosen. So we're going to go with the Pro Stealth, and then after doing the saddle size, it tells us we want a 142 millimeter, shall I say, handlebar selection data. So we're going to have the Pro Vibe Aero Super Light. Customers shoulder width one is a 410, so that's going to give us a 420 width bar. Then this is the vital stats which we've put in to generate the bike fit, and obviously telling me that my feet are too small. And then it gives us a few reports down the bottom here. So we have 3 sheets now. So this sheet here is the setup report according to the bike fit data and the input that I've put in for the crank. So this would be if you had a custom frame manufactured, then these numbers would be what that frame manufacturer would build that frame to, so he could put those numbers in. The next one is the coordinates report, which is the one we want. We'll come back to that in a second. And then this is the output report for the frame that we're going to choose. So the Forwards 2023 1 frame. It's saying that a recommended size for me would be a 52 point large, or 52 should I say, large. And then based on the way I want the bike to feel and ride, I've gone for a 49. So I've gone smaller, and that's because of the characteristics I want from the frame. I don't want it to be as stretched out as well, so we're going to change that stem length, which is actually what I've done on the one that is downstairs, which is featured on the website. And it's also saying for my height, it would recommend a 172.5 millimeter crank length, and that will come in important in a minute when we see these reports above. So the this page, which is page 2, this gives us the numbers based on the information we've put in. So the bike setup here would be based on the crank that the system's generating, 172.5, and then the crank select is when I've overrode it. So because I've changed the in here to a 170, it then changes the numbers, and it's fairly easy to see where that difference is, and it's the saddle goes up slightly, so the saddle is going to be raised ever so slightly to compensate that I'm not reaching as far for the crank, so it needs to raise me up ever so slightly. So we would concentrate on this column here, and then we just have 4 measurements which we need to do on the jig downstairs to calculate the exact right bike size. So it's these numbers here, and those coordinates would be, we would first of all measure we'd use the laser to take a marker from the center of the crank, and then we would slide the gauge, measure up. That would give us the height from the crank to the top of the saddle, and then it also measures the backwards the setback of the saddle. So this would go back, the gauge would go back, and then it would also measure that distance. Then we go forward and then measure using your gauge on the handlebar to measure the center of the handlebar. and then we go up as well with the gauge, and then it tells us the height of the handlebar. So we just match those numbers using spacers, different stem lengths, and just verify that these numbers are the same, and then that would give us the mock-up for the customer. We then would get the customer to sit up on that mock-up, make sure that feels correct. We could then verify it against their other bikes, and then that gives us the basis for the build. And then from that point we know that we can commit to having that particular frame painted in their custom colour.